Hello there and welcome back to Your Agenda programme. Right, did you see this video last week? It went viral on social media. This is just the audio, obviously, but have a listen and see if you recognise it.
Just caught a baby wombat. Look at the mother. It's like, oh, it's chasing after her.
I caught a baby wombat. Okay, Mama's right there. Let's let him go.
Okay, that was American influencer Sam Jones. She caused international outrage after she was filmed taking that baby wombat from its mother in Australia. She posted the incident on social media. Now, there was the most extraordinary outcry about it. I mean, listening to it now, it's a pretty revolting thing to do, but honestly, it went global. I mean, she had death threats. She later apologised for the distress that she caused. But considering the negative publicity she's had, it's really hard to imagine how she's ever going to come back from that. Like, I think she might have to properly change her name. Surely, imagine she's trying to apply for a job in the future. You just do one simple Google and that's going to appear at the top of the page. I don't think any recruitment agent would spot her. And it's really interesting because for me, that story really came to mind when earlier this week here in the UAE, authorities reminded social media users that they can actually be fined here for posting banned content on social media. It was all sort of announced in a statement. You'll have heard Serena Kelly talking about it earlier this week. But basically, the National Media Office in Abu Dhabi is urging residents to do what they describe as uphold national values and principles of respect, tolerance and coexistence while they're posting online. What does that actually mean in practice, though? Because it's kind of rules like that I don't know. I mean, I'm pretty unlikely as a middle-aged woman to publish anything outrageous on social media. Let's be honest. I kind of use it to promote the show or put pictures of my sons up, to be honest. But if you're a little bit more active, maybe you're younger, maybe you're doing more fun stuff than taking your kids out. It might be, it might make you feel quite nervous, because you might not know all the rules. And it really got us thinking about what it means in practice. So joining us now to talk through the rules and regulations is lawyer Luke Tapp. Now, he's a partner at Pinson Masons. And interestingly, he leads the firm's Middle East employment practice there as well. So we can talk about the impact that it could have on your job as well. Luke, thanks for joining us. Pleasure to have you on the line. How are you?
Hi, Georgia. I'm very well, thank you. Good morning. Thanks for having me on the show.
Well, it's lovely to have you back. Let's get into this. What specific types of social media content are banned under this UAE law?
Yeah, thanks, Georgia. It's a really interesting topic. It's a really important topic in the UAE, both from a sort of public interest perspective, also, as you say, from an employment law perspective. I think it really comes into two categories of social media content that individuals need to be mindful about when they're posting online. And there's the sort of penal code approach. There's the things that are criminal that certainly come across my desk and my colleagues' desks more often. And that are areas around sort of posting content where it's recordings or it's photographs of third-party individuals where you don't have their consent to post that online, or it's defamation that's also having an impact on a third party. And that's obviously unlawful. That brings in elements of the penal code, potential police investigation and public prosecution. And then there's the other side of it, kind of more in the genre of what you're referring to there around respect and tolerance, and topics around, things like just general impersonation, being unlawful to post online, obviously things connected to gambling, things connected to nudity, that kind of content that is regulated by the media laws and the cyber crimes law, where it's not involving third parties directly, but the content in itself would be considered to be unlawful and against the public interest.
Can I double check something with you? So sometimes this happens to me in the car. Somebody will behave incredibly badly on the roads in front of me. And what I do is I hand my phone to my child and I say, can you film them, please? Because I want to send it to Dubai police. And in that moment of sort of fury, that's definitely what I'm going to do. It's going to happen. Not once have I actually done it because I'm genuinely slightly, I think I know the rules, but I'm slightly nervous about it. You know, are you allowed to film bad behaviour and send it to Dubai police, or are you not allowed to film people without permission here?
Yeah, I mean, well, look, the starting point is that you're not allowed to film people without their permission. That would be the starting point that I'd want sort of listeners to have in mind. But ultimately, you know, in practice, obviously, we've seen a lot of police complaints that the firm's been involved with where recordings have been made. And you tend to find that in practice, there's a sort of balance of public interest test. So if it is something that, you know, is very serious, and obviously you don't have the time to get the consent of the person who's undertaking the offence, it can be helpful for the authorities, for the police, to have a recording of the incident. However, as I say, the starting point is that the strict legal position is that you do need the consent of anybody that you're filming in order to do so in a way that you can be comfortable that you're undertaking that filming.
Okay, so what if you get this wrong? What if you put up content that the UAE government would consider to be illegal for any of the reasons you've mentioned?
Yeah, well, it can create all sorts of ramifications for individuals, and we see that, you know, in practice, absolutely. So I suppose when things are first escalated to the police, it can result in issues like travel bans, police investigations into the matter, and if the police are satisfied or believe that a criminal offence has occurred, it could then escalate to public prosecution. And the discretion of the courts at that stage are pretty wide in terms of what decisions that can be handed down. Obviously, it could be a fine, a financial penalty, and there's a huge range of what that could amount to. You know, in the laws, there's reference to several 100,000 dirhams up to the millions of dirhams in terms of what the financial penalties can be for breaching some of these online laws. It can obviously result in custodial sentences as well, and then ultimately deportation back to the person's home country if it was committed by an expat. And so, yeah, very wide ranges of punishments that can be applied in these circumstances.
Do you get the sense that the authorities are monitoring social media? You know, do you hear examples of them enforcing these regulations?
I do come across some examples of where regulations appear to have been enforced because they've been picked up on by the authorities themselves. But in practice, generally, it tends to escalate when there's been a report to the police that somebody's infringed the online laws or the penal code in relation to what's being published online. So it tends to be pursuant to a report to the police. But yeah, I do understand that the regulators do undertake some online monitoring.
Is it unusually strict here in the UAE compared to other countries in the region? Because, I mean, I grew up in the UK. I don't think it's nearly as strict as this in Europe.
I think it is more strict in the UAE in terms of what can be published online, definitely. And as you say, I mean, I practiced law in the UK many years ago, and there seems to be less monitoring, less regulation around what could be published online. I have to say, from an employer's perspective, from an employment law perspective, even 15 years ago, you know, employers were instructing us on terminations for employees for activities online. That tended to be, you know, back in the day where people were saying they were unwell, they were taking sick leave, and then publishing that they'd gone to a theme park. It's become more sophisticated nowadays, Georgia, as you say. It's more kind of people publishing things online connected to their work deliberately, but then that creating an issue for the employer. So it's cross-jurisdictional from an employment law perspective. But I do agree with you that in principle, the laws are a bit tighter, a bit stricter in the UAE. And I do recommend that, you know, listeners are just that take that extra step in being mindful before they publish certain things online.
Yeah, let's talk about the employment law, because I remember back when, I mean, this sounds so old, doesn't it? I remember the moon landing. No, I remember I remember when TVs were black and white. I remember when social media first started, genuinely. I was working at the BBC, and there was this big thing, this big sort of edict came out that we had to be careful what we published on social media, because ultimately, if it's mentioned in our bio that we worked for the BBC, then we were seen as a representative and we were working as journalists. And journalists for the BBC are supposed to be completely neutral. You're kind of not meant to have an opinion. And obviously, sites like Twitter are sort of designed for you to express your opinions. So we all had to put this sort of slightly silly, nonsensical line in, retweets do not necessarily indicate support for this person's argument, that type of thing.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's journalism, that's a particular field. But do other organisations have rules about social media usage? Will it be in your contract without you even noticing, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, they do. Generally, they do. Organisations within this region have policies in relation to social media usage. Absolutely, it's very common. It's usually written into the employment contract to say, you agree that you'll comply with the policies of the organisation. And then within the whole booklet of policies, there'll be a social media policy which will say what you can and can't do online. And if a person breaches that social media policy, it absolutely can result in disciplinary action that an organisation could take against that individual, which could include dismissal if what's been posted online is so serious that it brings the organisation into disrepute. I mean, more recently, we've seen examples of senior people within an organisation posting a view on a social political issue such as the conflict within this region, and that creating issues within the organisation and with the organisation's clients that the company's having to take action in relation to. So it is really important that employees within this region are aware of what the social media policy of the organisation says, and they comply with it in principle and in accordance with the company's guidance on any particular topics, because it absolutely is the right of organisations to take disciplinary action against employees if there's been an infringement of company policy in relation to social media.
That is a very serious conversation we've just had, Luke. I may not post on social media for several days to come. Thank you very much indeed for bringing us up to date on all the rules and regulations there. Luke Tapp, lawyer, partner at Pinsent Masons, and he heads the firm's Middle East employment practice there. Regular guest on the agenda.